Well, we can go ahead and get started, and Alex will hopefully join us after a little bit. Hey, everybody. I can get the ball rolling, and then I think that like you should just unmute yourselves, and we should kind of just have a conversation as it goes. Like we didn't plan on any order of questions or anything yet. And I think it's kind of better that way if you just you can raise your hand, like literally really raise your hand, or just speak. But yeah, so we are really excited to talk with you, Scott. We read the Sarah book and talked about it last week, and this is an autofiction class. So we've been talking about what maybe that term means to us and reading a few different things and working on some of our own writing. And we had a really great discussion about the Sarah book last week. And so I think hopefully everybody's excited to chat with you.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. This is all right. Does anybody want to get us started?
I can go.
Miley. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
This might be a tough one, like right off the bat, but we've been talking a lot about autofiction and how it relates to truth in an interesting way, where like, you know, I don't know, truth is like what actually happened versus what you put on the page. I guess I just want to know, first of all, how true everything you wrote was, but maybe that might be too practical of a question. So maybe I should ask, when you were writing, how much did you consider like truthful?
Oh gosh, none of it in some ways. And I understand the question too. I mean, I think that that's kind of human. I do the same thing of like, how much of this is like factual or whatever. And I don't know if an answer of 63.5% or what, like that answers the question. But I don't think that I think that you have like the truth of fiction, which is more important than the truth of life. And the stories themselves can be true. Like, I mean, certain elements of all of those things, happened to me. Like I was a divorced guy living in an apartment with one of my friends who was also going through a divorce, and we were living this, I don't know, sort of strange homoerotic sort of life together. But at the same time, like I don't know if there's really, half of each chapter has any basis in sort of, fact. You're trying to create a narrative that's going to twist and turn in the way that I try to do with my narratives. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know. It's such a difficult question. I hate the thing that people are doing now, and maybe we've been doing this for a while, where it's like, oh no, this is a fiction. No, like this was my life. Like this was the internal. And if you're doing it at a deep enough level, what you're doing is, I don't know what my memories are anymore. Like I created my memories in the fiction. So my fictional memories have maybe even replaced like, the factual reality of the circumstances that took place during that time. So yeah, I mean, it's such a big question. I don't know.
Yeah, we talked a little about that too, like what you're referring to of people.
I mean, I don't even like autofiction, like, I would even like question those terms. Like, I think that's always healthy. There are writers who are kind of A students, and then there are writers who skip class. And like, I've always been the writer who skips class and has like a certain disrespect towards those, particular things that you're supposed to respect. So yeah, it's not something that I think that I recognized as I was writing, or that I ever recognize when I'm writing. I cut you off, Mesha.
No, you're good. I just was going to say the book before the Sarah book that we read was We the Animals by Justin Torres, which I consider, I mean, it followed, like if you look him up on Wikipedia, it follows his life, right? And I think it's an interesting text to talk about in this class. But someone had pulled up an interview where he said, oh, this isn't about me, or it isn't my life, or whatever. And we kind of talked about how, well, okay, I guess if he wants to have it that way, but we all felt that the book was stronger when we thought about him living certain aspects of it. And so
Yeah.
what the intention is of someone writing something that does mirror parts of their life and then saying, no, it's not. This
Yeah,
isn't.
and I don't know why writers do that too. Like, I think that there's maybe this, I don't know, that first person narration is less than, like, in the world of fiction. I don't know, a first person text, how does that compare to, a Tolstoy text? Or, it's always like, there's always these like, levels of what's considered. So I think that there's some insecurity with those things, where we don't believe like our life is enough, when that's all writers do anyway, is use their lives inside of their work. So yeah, I mean, I always like books where it feels like, oh, okay, this is that person, even if that was never necessarily the case. I'm to the point where I don't even, there's a famous story about Joe Strummer that I read, where somebody was, this is in the Mescalero days, like at the end, and they're hanging out with Joe Strummer, and Joe Strummer's like really nervous about going on that night. And the guy was like, "But you're Joe Strummer from the Clash." And Joe Strummer says, "Was I?" And I'm sort of at that point as well, where I guess I'm old enough now where I realize all of these like singular eyes that I thought was me for a long period of time, maybe a decade of my life, I realized that was just a fiction as well, that I was sort of telling myself, that you're these collections of all of these Scotts, or you're these collections of all of these various Meshas. And I don't know if one necessarily cancels out the other.
Who else has something that you wanted to ask or say?
Y'all are a very somber class. I feel intimidated.
Oh, we saw Rachel and then Hannah.
So when we were discussing your book, I think some of us thought that it was really funny, and some of us thought that it wasn't maybe as funny. I was wondering if you intended it to be a funny book.
To be funny. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I was trying. I want it to be funny, but at the same time, like, I would be so upset if you were thinking of it as like, oh, what a funny humorist. Like, I want it to be not funny too, and fucked up. Like, what the fuck? Like, if I don't get all of those things, I think I would be like really, really disappointed. I used to believe, when I was a young writer, or whatever you want to call me at that time, it's like, oh, if you get like reviews of your book and people like it, that it'll make you happy. And then you realize, like, sometimes the good reviews are like worse than the bad reviews. Meaning that somebody who liked it, they liked it for all of the wrong, weird reasons that you weren't even intending at the start. And maybe someone who, for instance, there's a review, this has been a couple of years ago, like, too many people laugh in this book. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's a good editorial comment. Like, I have all this John Cassavetes, like, endless laughter, this endless manic sort of laughter that runs through the book, where I think if I could just cut out the word laugh a whole lot, like, it would probably improve my writing. So yeah, was it trying to be funny? Yeah, I think so. These questions feel confrontational too.
This is a serious group. We had.
Were you trying to be funny? No, I wasn't at all.
Not even a little bit. Hannah.
Okay, hi. I was wondering, like, how was using like first person more vulnerable? Were you afraid if people were gonna like take it too seriously? Like, what was that experience kind of like?
No, I think I think it's just natural in storytelling. Like, I think first person works better than like third person. If I say, like, this morning I was walking to my car and I was robbed, like, you're immediately going to connect to that more than my friend this morning texted me that they were walking to their car and at 9:30 they were robbed. Like, it's going to immediately like distance you. And I've always been interested in things that, a narrative that kind of feels like, a whisper, or that feels like something you're not supposed to be reading. Like, there's always an element of that I think is like really, my favorite books are sort of, books like that, where it's like, ooh, I don't know if I should be reading this. There's something kind of like awkward about it. Looking back on it, I mean, also too, like, I think when you're like publishing a book, you don't realize like, oh my God, all these people are gonna read it. Like like you understand that as like a concept. But then once you like publish the thing, you realize, oh my God, like people really are reading this book. What did I do? Why did I do this? And so, yeah, I don't know. Did that answer the question? What was the question again? I think I started talking.
First person, I think
Yeah,
yeah.
first person. No, I mean, I just love first person writing. We have such a long tradition of first person writing, and there's a whole different canon if you discount all this third person shit, instructors make you read. Like there's a whole different canon. You can start with Sappho rather than Homer. You can talk about Catullus rather than Virgil. And I mean, that can like continue on. And the tradition of the like first person is like so rich across the world as well. I mean, some of the best first person autobiographies are Persian, or Middle Eastern in nature. While we're still like monks, stuck somewhere doing our prayers and writing our religious poetry. Somebody's telling you about chopping off somebody's head with a sword in a battle, and you should have seen it. There's a book by this writer, Bean, who that's how it opens up. Someone has chopped off these heads and they're kissing the heads together to make the fellow soldiers like laugh during the 12th century or the 11th century, whenever it's taken place. So it's like such a strange tradition. And yeah, I mean, I love first person writing. And I think that as much as I can, or like a book that doesn't know what it is, like I love that. I love a first person book, but I also love a book that doesn't know if it's a particular thing. So yeah, I mean, go with that first person. First person's so hard though. It's so much harder than third person, I think.
Yeah, we talked some about Sappho and how it was like kind of radical actually, that she puts herself in there with, the gods. Like she just puts herself, her own name at first, the I, but
Yeah.
her own name, and she just like does that. And how
Yeah.
we could, I don't know that we think of first person as being so powerful and radical anymore, but I think it really, like, it is. It's like a statement. You're placing yourself in a book, and yeah.
All of those writers in the 2000s, who wrote like the Jonathan novels, like they'll wind up coming around to the first person as well and commenting in the Guardian about their autofiction. It happens eventually to all of them, whatever's happening, right? Got to get some of that autofiction. It's brand new.
Right.
It's amazing. It's what the kids are doing.
Ari, did you have your hand?
Yeah, I did. I was wondering, because it is such a stream of consciousness and sort of intimate, and it's written in such a specific style, what it was like working with an editor, and if they sort of tried to like undermine the integrity of what it was, and if there's anything that you wished was in there that didn't end up being in there, or just how you navigated that with such an interesting and specific piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to talk about these books, especially when like that book was, published like 5 years ago. I was working on that book in 2009. Like I have a book of short stories that I published a chapter just in a book of short stories, just for giggles. And that didn't even wind up in the book. Like the book kind of transformed. So I always think of like, there's a Henry Ford quote, "History is bunk." I always feel that way when you're like thinking back towards like a book, because a lot of the stuff that I think you say about it is just, again, maybe another fiction as well. I mean, I worked, with my editor, Gian DeTrapino. This is the second book we published together. I don't know how much he was editing at the time. Sometimes the best editor doesn't really edit much. They just say, this part sucks, right? Get rid of this. This is, or points and says, this is what you do well, do that more. And so there was a lot of that with that book. Like we weren't in the best of shape, either one of us though at the time. Like we'd almost lost our friendship over it, but I don't know if I would change it. But you know what? I haven't looked at it in a couple of years though either. I had like a big crisis of faith, I don't know, 2019 or something, and I went back and read my books. And there were things in it that, I don't know, maybe slightly bothered me, but things that I don't think were enough to probably change. But yeah. Editors are weird. I mean, that's where I'm at now. Like, I can't imagine writers who like change editors with each book. That seems strange to me, because I had a very like specific sort of experience like with my editor where we shouldn't have done the like things, you know, you don't like lob in together like editing together with friendship, together with business, and like we were so attached at the hip that you know, it created difficulties with the work. But yeah, I mean, I love to be edited. I love to destroy things, like especially after you make something and you destroy it. Like maybe to explain the book better to you, like the book that was in the original draft of the book, I think it was maybe more conventional. I don't know if you've all ever seen like Robert Bresson films, you know, the French filmmaker. I kind of write, like he believed that actors should do like 100 takes and then they break down, right? They like emotionally, they're no longer acting. And I think a lot of times with writers, because I do that in my writing, I try to go again and again and again. I do this paragraph again and again and again. With writers, a lot of times, I think we insert the writing into it, or we insert the acting into it. And so, you know, over a course of a couple years, we had big falling outs over it. There was you know, it was the first time that we really had a contract at Tyrant Books. And I was the guinea pig for having contracts at that particular publishing house, rather than, you know, you can take a vacation to my parents' place or whatever, or here's some drugs, you know, those particular things. So the book transformed from something conventional to maybe something kind of slightly more unconventional. But I found that though, I can remember the night that I was like, ooh, I can just lump these things together and bounce them off one another, and it'll be incredibly effective and will shoot you through the book. It'll almost feel like you're not reading the thing. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question either. I'm doing a horrible job.
We did talk about how even though some people thought it was funnier than others, whatever, people have different experiences, but we did all kind of talk about how it moves at the draft that you ended up publishing moves very fast, like you move through it. And then so that, yeah, I've seen like some Goodreads. This has been like, I don't know, last few years where it's more like there's some Goodreads of you that I love where it was like wanna be like incel voice or No.
something like that, where it's like, but at the same time, even if you think about that, it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe that voice is kind of part of like literature though, as well, that kind of dumb edgy guy. Like, I don't know if I like that character in that book. I don't know if you're necessarily supposed to like that that character.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where I'm also like, oh, that's not me.
Barbara.
A comment you made earlier about writing or fiction that doesn't know what it is kind of reminded me of things we talked about in class this semester. We kind of talked about how writing autofiction or any genre really can help us kind of unearth things about ourselves through our characters and whatnot. And I wonder if that was the case for you in writing the Sarah book, and what that was like, or I guess in general, what you think of writing as a means of self-discovery, whether you agree with that, or I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would disagree with it. I understand it, and I also am not like poo-pooing it though either, because I know what people mean by that. I mean, I feel like I feel like it is like, you know, a snake kind of shedding its skin with those, you know, books that you push out. Like you have to like push them out, and it is like this weird exorcism. But I don't think you really I don't think I discover anything. I mean, I don't think I knew very much to begin with, and I don't know if I know that much even today. If you were to, you know, ask me about it, I think writing. I think the ones that do it, it's a weird sort of like graphomania. It's something almost like possession. And yeah, I've been possessed since I was about 17 or 18. I wish I could get away from it. I wish I could get rid of it. But my God, like it took over, you know, it took over my life. And we forget that, like bibliomancy, right? There was like a magical quality to these books, whether it's the, you know, I Ching, or if we talk about those monks in, you know, someplace in the south of France in the 1100s. You know, they were opening up a book and making decisions based around that. And there was something that was non-rational about it, that was, you know, just a part of some strange sort of reptilian brain, you know. So yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. So I don't know if, you know, if I really believe that you don't discover. I know I've discovered things, but I think you discover things on like an aesthetic level. Of, oh yeah, everybody's wrong, this works. Or oh, you know, oh yeah, like you can do this. And even as you read as well, you know, talking about books that kind of morph together. Or I just read Chateaubriand's Memoirs from Beyond the Tomb. The second volume just came out in the New York Review of Books. You should pick it up. It's flying off the shelves. But in that book, he's telling you about being alive during the French Revolution and being a member of the aristocratic class and a monarchist. He's a royalist. That's the reason why we don't really read him as much today, because he thinks Napoleon is a bad guy and the king is a good guy. But within that text, it suddenly becomes a biography. I'm sorry about my dog. There must be like the UPS guy going crazy out there this evening.
It's not very loud. It doesn't matter.
Okay, good. But it goes from a memoir into a biography of Napoleon. And I mean, a biography of Napoleon for 1,000 pages. And his Napoleon is better than Hamlet, right? What the hell happened there? You know, I would like to get Chateaubriand on a Zoom call and like ask him like why. And he even tells you, he's like, I'm going to pause for a moment, and because his side, you know, his story's running side by side with Napoleon, and there's a great tradition of that no one tells. You know, if you look at Herodotus's The Histories, what is that thing? That book's sort of a history. It's also sort of a travel book. I went to Egypt one time. This is what I saw. It's also like weird, like a whole section of like weird animals that I believe exist, right? And then he's telling you about, you know, the Greeks defeating the Persians. So those books, I think, are rich. The things that don't know what they are, in the same way that we're surrounded with this junk now where everybody knows their opinion about whatever issues taking place. And I can remember a day like back in 1999, and you didn't have an opinion about something that was happening in Asia, or you didn't have an opinion about something that was going on. And those were beautiful, kind of glorious days, because the grave awaits us all. And it's those books that don't know that I feel comfort from, like where it feels like a friend who's not like conning me over something or trying to sell me something, which is like Writer Life 101 2022. It's almost like the creation of a book so that you can talk about the book rather than to have the actual book, which I kind of find interesting. But yeah, that's a good question too. And I don't know. Maybe I have changed, and maybe I have uncovered things. I did say I don't think I'm the same I was 10 years ago. But maybe that's just stuff that you say in Zoom talk.
Yeah.
Maybe I am.
That's
Maybe
the
I am
Zoom
the
Scott.
same, right? Trust me, right? The con man's motto.
Rachel. And then Drew.
I was wondering what Sarah thinks of the book.
Oh, that's a great question. Because here it's going to come out like Sarah exists, right? I sent her the book. She's always like, when I think back to like our relationship, the thing that like I remember in the very beginning, because let's see, how old was she when I first decided that I wanted to date this person? She was like a woman, right? She was like 24. And I think I was 19, so maybe she's 23. She was 23 and she just thought I was like silly, right? But she was always like supportive. And I can see we had a period of time where we like dated in college. I knew her in college. And I can remember after she graduated, she gave me a gift of a journal. She's that type of person who she's kind of like that mom personality of like, oh, they want to write. Let's get them a nice leather bound journal to place their thoughts in. So there was always that. I sent her the book and she just said she wished me luck. She thought I was really talented. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I don't know. Maybe I'd want to know what she thought, but maybe I don't want to know too much of what she thought either.
Do you think she read it?
Probably not.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing.
I don't think she did.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't like books like the kind I write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
She reads like popular fiction. Yeah.
I feel like she needs to make an exception though for a book that's
Maybe she
titled
has.
after.
This is hilarious. Last week though, she sent me a text with she was in a bookstore getting she's trying to find some map or something for a geography class for our daughter. She sent me in some picture from Barnes and Noble. My books were in there. She was acting like she was super excited that she saw these books from her ex-husband in a bookstore, and I was like, oh yeah, that's them. Yeah, they. Like, wow.
Drew.
I suppose my question is kind of related to that. If you're kind of portraying a character negatively for the purpose of the story, but they're either based in real life or like there's an inevitable comparison to real life, how do you balance kind of respecting that real person while making the character the best antagonist, the best kind of character for your story?
Yeah, I mean, and I think kind of that balance thing is always a problem with like first person writing, because people tend to think of it as like diary like, or you have to trim that sort of stuff back. I wanted to make sure that, Scott was the bad guy in the scenario and was the awful person in the scenario, but there was like a golden heart there at the same time that you sort of forgave him. And so oftentimes I would find like, it'd be like, oh no, I have to trim this back from the Sarah part because it makes her a little too rough. Like I need to have these kind of balances between the two characters. But at the same time though, like in terms of, I'm doing that for my own sake, right? So that you can go through the book. I don't think it's of like a negative portrayal or a positive portrayal. We're like in this prison of likability in relationship to fiction now that's just dreadful, right? That is just awful, and so I think when you're writing first person stuff and there's stuff about in your life in there, you just you have to be merciless. There's a higher ethic than the ethic of personal relationships. I don't know if I'd do the same thing now, right? But in terms of the ethic of that book was, yeah, let's burn it down for a moment for the sake of the book.
Yeah, Ruby.
When you first started writing the Sarah book, is it what you envisioned the end result to be?
No, it's totally different. And this is maybe where you come into like destroying things too. Like you destroy and you destroy some more, and then it changes and becomes this becomes this other sort of thing. Like originally, I guess it would, how would you describe it? It's like going to be this piece of like new journalism. It was going to be kind of like a biography of the Sarah character. I was going to go in and I was going to interview all these people from her life, people that she didn't even talk to anymore, and then I was going to build this little bauble of a person, and then you know what happened, and then of course the book became a stupid divorce book. You know, I teach English 101, and there's like topics where it's like you hate the my grandma died essay, you hate the child trauma abuse essay, and you hate the divorced essay. Well, I've written three books that completely correspond to those particular topics. Even if they like repel you, you find yourself kind of drawn to them. I think that there was a version of the Sarah book, and maybe this goes back to somebody's question about the editing as well. There was a version of the Sarah book that was a lot more freewheeling than the version that was actually published. And I think that was where the arguments always happen between me and Gianna, is that maybe the Sarah book is a little bit closer to Crapalacha in the way that I'd organize things, and the way that I'd kind of taken liberty with, like, just, you know, my war on narrative, my war on the American, you know, piece of short fiction, or my war on the American novel. And I had to fill in those empty spaces that Crapalacha is full of empty spaces throughout the text. So yeah, I mean, my books, I'm sort of different though than most writers. Like most writers are like, okay, one book and you go through the publication process, and now I start on the next book. And you write that book and you go through the publication process, and now book 3, and you write that book and you go through the publication process. That would be like, you know, a painter who's like, I'm going to make, you know, one painting, and it's gonna be great. And then after it's displayed, I want to make another painting, and I try to think of it more like kind of a body of work, where publication sometimes is the worst thing that you can do. And so the Sarah book was definitely still a sister of, you know, Crapalacha, more of a sister than it even is now. So yeah.
That's cool and interesting. We're reading the next book that we're reading, that we're looking at this week does, I mean, it's Tombsong by Julian Herbert. I don't know if you, but he sort of, it's like it's like a biography of his mother, but then it's completely not. Like it seems like he kind of wanted to start making it that way, but then
Oh, that's amazing. I want to read that, Mesha, because I've written a biography of my mother that's sort of not a biography of my mother. That's the book, that's the last book that I gave up on after 3 years, that I'm sure you know about and I've talked about, but yeah.
Well, yeah, he's like, his mother is dying, but then she's not dying. So he's like writing the book because she's dying, but then she's not dying. And he's like, wait a minute, what does that mean for the book? You know?
Yeah, I want to check that out. I want to check that out. Because my book's this big third-person book.
Okay.
It's like family history, but then halfway through you realize, oh, this is the writer's mother, and then it's a biography of my mother for a good 100 pages, and then I get bored at the end, and the book.
It begins. It's third person before it gets to.
So I moved from the third to the first.
Miley.
Yeah, I was wondering both why you wrote the book and also why you dedicated it to Julia.
Yeah, I don't think that I probably would have got through like the publication process without dedicating it to Julia. You know, I guess all those early books, those are all dedicated to Sarah, and then we got divorced, then I got remarried, and so that person's a part of your life. And so yeah, I mean, I guess that is kind of strange too, isn't it? No.
A lot of people wanted to talk last week in class about what it meant to have a
and also
divorce.
this, I can shock you and say that there might be as much Julia in some of the stories of Sarah as there is Sarah. So that would also be a strange thing that maybe Sarah would get upset about, that this new person has found a way into those particular stories. Yeah. Yeah, don't y'all worry about book dedications. Like that's small potatoes, folks. Oh, what was the first part of your question, then, Molly? I completely.
It was why did you like? It sounds like you started writing it as something different, and then the divorce happened.
Sure. This is what happened. All right. And this is
Yeah,
what's going to
please.
happen to you as a writer as well. And you're going to find out about this. You want to stay an amateur as long as you can. All right. Because that's going to allow you to do what you want to do. Once you start thinking of yourself as a professional, you are going to be trapped and you're a book away from just being a hack. So what happened was, in 2012, I finally signed a contract for this book that I've been working on. And so I'm stuck in this damn contract. I'm in debt. It's a book contract of $40,000. And guess what? I needed $40,000 to get out of debt. So I start writing this thing. And you spend a year of your life, you know, giving it the energy that it needs. And then you're kind of stuck with it. You can't start a whole new book over if you're trying to get the $40,000. So yeah, I mean, in some ways there are those kind of like practical considerations that play a role in just the publication game in general. And I think publication, like, I think it's an awful thing. I think it does awful things to writers, especially in the 20th century and 21st century. You know, all the books that I love, those books that I've mentioned, it's not like, you know, people were reading, you know, Herodotus's The Histories. Well, maybe they were. I mean, Greece was pretty, you know, library-ritty society. But if you're talking about Chateaubriand, like, he doesn't even show that book to anybody. That book's published after he dies. Like, that's the whole purpose of it. Or James Boswell, just think that guy who's one of my favorite writers, like, you know, he's dead in 1786, and we don't even get the journals about his life until the 1950s because the family is so uncomfortable with the circumstances of his libido and the circumstances of, you know, the reality of, you know, his relationships and his depressions and, you know, all of those things. So yeah, I mean, I guess part of the why would be that, you know. I had a friend who was an editor, was like, we have to have a book or we're going to go bankrupt. We have to have a book. You know, I listened to that for a year or two, maybe even longer, you know. So and he didn't go bankrupt. Maybe that's all.
Good news.
Yeah, he didn't go bankrupt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was wondering about the theme of, I don't know if you meant it, I'm sure it was intentional, but I don't know, the theme of like atonement or like repentance in the book, the fact that it doesn't seem like the narrator is asking to be forgiven or wants to be forgiven or like that matters. I was just wondering like if that's something that you thought about when writing the book, and like just what that concept means to you.
Yeah, and I think that's where like that's such a long tradition in first person writing as well. I mean, that's like Saint Augustine, right? Like conversion narratives, you know, you have to have this, you know, mea culpa, you know, forgive me. And I think that's where oftentimes those books sort of start feeling fake. And I mean, the memoir industry is full of that junk now, right? Where it's all like, all of that sort of stuff that people are feeling, they just want to put it on the page so that someone doesn't think that they're, you know, a bad person, or that, you know, all of those things that everybody worries about, whether or not they say they do or don't. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever do atone for a lot of those things, you know. I think that what I wanted to do is I always want to just make these like little palaces. There's a beautiful passage in Chateaubriand. I think I even have it in my phone from where I was reading, where at the end he's talking about Countess who he'd had a long relationship with. Him and Madame Chateaubriand did not get along too well. And at the end he says, you know, he's building her, you know, a sepulcher. And she can come within this church, and she can rest in the future. Meaning she's already dead when he's writing the book. He's talking about the memory of her, the spirit of her, And the last line of the chapter is, I have placed your image here. And there's something like so glorious about that, where I think that when we're dead and gone and you're looking back, wouldn't it be wonderful just to have somebody who like took an honest portrait of you and maybe saw you the way that you really were rather than the way that you wanted to be seen? Because we all want to be seen in a certain fashion, but that's the reason why I think I make those books, is to like, yeah, make those places that only exist in books. I mean, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in that's sort of stuff that most people believe in, but I believe in books. I believe in the eternal life of books, which also has a shelf life, right? That here for a month I was reading about this dead French dude, right, who knew Napoleon. There's a beautiful he is the one who, he says, well, he goes to Versailles and he's there with Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, and he's looking at their faces and he's talking about Louis's jawline and Marie Antoinette's chin, and then he ends one of the sections saying that, and it was a good thing that I was looking at their jawline and their chins, because years later in 1806, I would be the one who would help dig up their corpses and identify their bodies based upon their jawline and their chin. And it's all about the passage of time. And Proust, this is one of Proust's favorite books. He stole so much from it. And so, yeah, like there's something glorious about the fact that, the monarchy of France were mutilated and destroyed, as they probably should have been, right? But there was at least one individual who was going to tell that story, right? Tell that passage from what the society was at one point in time and what the society became. And I've lived long enough that I've seen my own West Virginia, right, that I've lived in. The Sarah book is as much about the goddamn death of this place as it is about this little couple having these kind of funny fights and all these funny hospital stories in some ways.
Yeah, Jaden.
I have two questions. One is why you decided to put pictures in the books and how you decided which pictures. And then also, could you talk a bit about the part at the beginning where you said some parts of this book are plagiarized, and like why you added text from other authors?
Yeah, good. I mean, that's maybe goes back to somebody else's question too. I'm like answering your all's questions, but I'm answering with somebody else's question that they asked. That was one version of the book. It was heavier with pictures. And it was a weird sort of where it almost like saved me from writing if you just like insert a bunch of pictures into a book. And maybe that's the future of books too, and maybe to a certain extent, but it had more pictures and it was kind of weighed down in pictures. I like pictures in books. I mean, that's the reason why I kind of did it. And a lot of people started doing it around the same time. I was doing it in manuscript, I want to say, before they were.
It's good to have that on the record.
Yeah. But at the same time, we've had a long tradition of that. 19th century novel. Can you imagine Charles Dickens without like illustrations? Like, no, I don't think you can. Like, there's the same. It's a different book without the illustrations, and I want to put illustrations in it. I've always dreamed, and maybe one of you all get the chance to do it. I'm probably getting too old, but I always dream, like, out of all of this technology we have, why haven't we created a new form of text with images, with moving images that could be like a book, right? Why isn't your book on tape or your book on your Kindle? Why isn't it playing a song as you're reading through a particular passage, and that song selected by the author who wrote that particular passage? So yeah, I've always dreamed of that, but I'm stuck here with this old-fashioned sort of way of writing, which I guess is a great technological development too. Did you all see there was a show on PBS, Nova, about paper making? And I've always wondered why prose like overtook poetry. Why were the romantics like the last great poets, and then they turned it into a fine art? And it has everything to do with paper. It has everything to do with this very practical thing that Paper was incredible, in the medieval, ages. Why aren't there great novels? Well, paper was made out of animal skin for the most part. And you'd have to kill 40, cows in order to make a 350-page ornamented sort of book. So I guess that's the first part of the question. And the portions plagiarized, I just thought it was funny, like kind of made me laugh that like somebody like would buy a book and then they say, oh, what, this book is plagiarized. A lot of my books are kind of like that. Like I wanted, like Crapalachia was all the concept was, I'm going to write this whole book and then at the end I'm going to tell you it was all a lie and leave you with that feeling, even though it was probably the lie is the fact that I was telling you that I'm lying when the reality is probably closer to the text. Hill William, it was just like, okay, I want to put together some short stories and then at the end I'm going to say, will you tell me your secrets? All right, your secrets are safe with me. I promise I won't tell. You know what people do? They send me emails telling me their secrets, and I've started that. So yeah, I mean, and there's a tradition of that too, I guess, of stealing sentences, putting them in your text. The story I always say is there's a sentence in there of the he said, she said bullshit. And Julia thought it was funny that somebody would put a Limp Bizkit reference in their book without telling anybody that they put a Limp Bizkit reference in their book. I even took it out in a draft, and she got so mad. And she's like, "You will put that back into the book." And so she said bullshit. Some of y'all probably like, Limp Bizkit, who's Limp Bizkit? But anyway, it's not cool. That's for sure. I think that answers that, I believe.
Yeah, we talked some about, because we were talking about, I don't know if like every book, I certainly know my books have this, and I think yours does, but the thing in the beginning, that not the plagiarized part, but the thing that like the legalese, right, that books have that say this is the work of fiction. And I don't know if you know any more about this, as best as we could find, that came from, in Hollywood, they'd made a movie about Raskolnikov, and some of the people depicted in it were still alive and got really mad. And their lawyers had said, if you put a disclaimer there, then you would be fine. And then it seems like maybe publishing started doing that as well.
Yeah, it's it's kind of interesting. Just sometimes there's little things that pop up like that for legal reasons, and
right.
they become part of the culture. There's some indie book, I can't remember who it is, where they're like, this book is dedicated to you. All of the characters in this book are you, and it just continues going on like that. So.
Alex, you got your hand up, and I know Valentina, I think you did too, but we'll go to Alex and then Valentina.
One of my questions is just kind of going back to something you mentioned earlier about kind of like cutting things out, or like you had ideas and then you end up like either like not including them at all despite thinking about it, or like you had it in and then you took it out. And just kind of like, I was just wondering if there was what the indications are for you that it's like time to take something out, or that you really should, like, not that like nudging feeling, but kind of just like what truly tells you it's time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all instinct, and we try to intellectualize this kind of process that I don't think you can really do. I think this stuff is instinct, and usually the best writers are the ones that have the best instincts when it comes to their work. And even certain writers who are great writers, it's like, ooh, I wish that writer had a little bit better instincts. And this is true, this is true of myself at the same time. I think I worked probably like you guys are, working, where you work for years and you're working on your book and you think your book's gonna, work and you're gonna get published, and then you realize like, oh no, I'm gonna write a different book. So you write a different book and you go through that 2 or 3 times. And I'd done that, and I was 30 years old, and I was getting a little bit of traction, and then I was just like, I'm just going to throw together everything I want to throw together in a book, and if something's not adding to the book, then I'll start to rip. And I wrote a whole book that way. Like Crapalachia was just slapped together. It's a book that is totally constructed in that fashion, leading up to one death. Part 2 begins, another death happens, and then I have to fill up 30 pages. And I had to find a way to fill up 30 pages, and I filled it up over the course of time. And there's something about the ending of that book, because I think when I get jealous of other writers, I'm jealous of what they get away with. There's some writers who write books and it's like, oh, I have no interest in making this 19th century object here in the modern world. I'm interested in writers who get away with something. And so taking stuff out of the Sarah book, I mean, I can't really necessarily remember specifically things that I removed. But yeah, there's a ton of it. Some of it is just like, in a world of books where there's so many books, if you're publishing on an indie press, which I've done throughout my career because I want a little bit of control, it's more just I want to keep my sanity. And I don't want to become one of those people that's given yet another interview or is now writing a movie starring whoever, you know, or they're now working on their TV show or whatever. When shoot, I've just lost my thought. When you're working like in kind of like indie lit, you know, it's you just have to shout, right? You have to get your work out there. And so some of my work just like punches you in the face, right? It punches you in the face. And because that's the only reason why people are still reading me, because it does that. You know, if I published a book that was nice and quiet and soft, I wouldn't probably be talking to, you know, you all in this particular classroom. So sometimes you're just inserting things that will get the most, will make the reader react the most, right? Or that will make you, even when you're reading the book back again in 2018, 2019, say, oh my God, I put that in there. Did I really put that in there? My God, I did. And there's something, it's like exciting about that. You know, it's like breaking into a house when you're a kid. You guys have broken into houses when you're kids, right? It's like breaking into a house. And it's like, oh, are we going to get caught? Oh, no, we're not going to get, not with anybody living there, of course, but, you know, like abandoned places and stuff. Yeah, that's sort of that feel. So I think I kind of left things in that I write in scenes. I mean, all of my books, you can take out a part. I can read it somewhere at a reading and people are going to laugh or people are going to get upset or, you know, that's going to happen. And then you can put it back in. Hopefully when you put it back in, it works alongside all of these other pieces. What you try to do is, I think of my books maybe differently than some writers. I think of them like movies. You know, I heard Francis Ford Coppola tell Sofia Coppola that, you know, you want to put the image that's the strongest in the front, all right, at the very front of your movie. And then when the tone starts changing, you need to make sure that you're aware of that, so that that tonal shift that happens, you're actually going to create an experience for somebody, right? And I guess the tonal shift, you know, in the Sarah book, just at least the one that's popping out on the top of my head, you know, when things start kind of dying, you know, when the dog dies and you realize, you know, that the relationship is, you know, irreparable and isn't gonna work out. So sometimes it's a tonal thing. You're making a diamond necklace, right? You want to shine up. That's me shining up the diamonds. You want to shine each of them up, but it has to go together. It has to be, you know, a piece that makes sense, right? And it's going to draw the eye throughout the whole thing. I don't, you know, my books are kind of conceptual to me, so they're more like shapes in my brain. Where you can't even kind of put them into words, but yeah, it's a tonal sort of thing.
All right, Valentina, you're our last one. You're gonna wrap it up for us.
I wanted to ask if you had a particular reason for the abrupt ending.
That's a good question, actually. That's the thing that always bothers me about the Sarah book, is that it just kind of go and just fall. Like I've started this process of this kind of shape, you know, changing that's going on, this you know, on off, you know, manic depressed throughout the book, and then bam, just finish it. And yeah, probably if I were still to tinker with that thing, you know, I would do something with the ending. I think that whole kind of like Sarah hymn, that like Whitman-esque kind of Sarah hymn, was much longer in the original, where it went on for pages of this was a Sarah and that was a Sarah, that sort of stuff. So yeah, we just cut it off. But you know what? Sometimes, it's just a book. Sometimes shorter is
It's got to
better.
end somewhere.
Short. That's just like, I think that's probably a good rule. Keep it as short as you can. Use one word, instead of two. Write with verbs. That's all there is to teach about any of this stuff.
Okay, awesome. Scott, thank you so much. I don't know if anybody has any last minute things to say, but we're super appreciative.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate it.